And now, ladies and gentlemen, for our live stream today, here is Spokesman-Review writer Kip Hill.
Well, hey, thanks, Jesse, and thanks all of you for joining us here on our virtual Northwest Passages installment today. It's March 4th. It's sunny outside, and it's getting warmer, and so we thought it'd be a good time to bring in Garrett Jones, who's our director of our Parks Department. There he is, Garrett. Hey, thanks for joining us today.
Oh, thanks for having me, Kip. It is a beautiful day in Spokane.
It is indeed, and I think a lot of people are ready to get back out after the long winter. So we're hoping to talk today with you about the redevelopment of Riverfront Park, which is hitting its last legs in terms of the things that people voted for a few years ago. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today, what we can look forward to this spring and summer. But I think we should start kind of with a look back, because this has been a several-year project, and I kind of wanted to talk about the past, present, and future of the park, which I know you've been a part of. So maybe you could let folks know sort of how you got involved with the Parks Department and what your involvement has been with redevelopment to this point.
Yeah, well, thanks, Kip. So I started with the Parks Department in 2008 as an intern, still going to college at the time for landscape architecture. I have a degree in landscape architecture, and I actually kind of cold called, knocked on the door at park operations and said, hey, are you guys looking for an intern? At the time they weren't, but I kept coming back. And before you know it, I was hired on, and then eventually hired on as the full-time landscape architect. And then in 2012 is when, working with the park board, we said, man, we have to do something with Riverfront Park. There hasn't been any investment here since World's Fair. So what's the next 10 to 20 years look like? And so that's when we started our internal process around the master plan.
And for those folks that may not remember what the master plan was about or what it suggested, I mean, what was that process like, and what did it suggest we needed in the park?
Yeah, exactly. So in 2012, we did a two-phase. So we worked, and this was all done in-house with city staff. And so we went out to the community and said, what are we missing? What type of economic drivers do we want? What type of events do we want to have downtown? How can Riverfront Park really be that and continue to be that crown jewel? How do we put an emphasis and celebrate the river in a spectacular way that sometimes we've always kind of turned our back towards the river? How do we bring in, technology, efficiency, environmental sensitivities as far as water conservation and how we manage our parks? And so we went through a full, robust process all the way up to 2014 is when we adopted the master plan through the park board and the city council.
So we're now, I guess, 7 years on from that. And I guess I should mention, along with, this chat, I have a bunch of questions for Garrett that I've probably asked him before, but not in this format before. But if you have questions as well about what you're seeing in Riverfront Park, what we can look forward to kind of going forward, feel free to include those as well. We'll try to work some of those in as we go along. But, at the time, I think, there have been several decisions that have been made sort of as this process has gone along. And I know that the focus has kind of always been on those key elements that were in that master plan that were part of that bond issue. Could you list those off and sort of where we're at in terms of those being open, if they're going to open soon, what the effect
Absolutely.
has been, kind of just for folks? Yeah.
Absolutely. So 5 major projects were a part of the master plan, and that was structured in that November of 2014 bond ask to the public to reinvest that $64 million back into Riverfront Park. And so that first project right out of the gate, the master plan, the input was to move the Ice Palace that was traditionally under the pavilion and move that out to more of the urban edge along Spokane Falls Boulevard, and really thinking of, is it just a traditional ice rink, or what does that look like? And so through that process in the Citizen Advisory Committee and through the Park Board and in our public outreach, it was recommended to us to go with more of a ribbon type theme. So that was our first project. that was opened in 2017 for the winter season. So that was the first out of the 5. The next was following along that Spokane Falls corridor was the Loof Carousel. Traditionally, one of the greatest assets. I think sometimes we have to sit back and look at what we have in that carousel and that one-of-a-kind, truly artifact art piece that we have the ability to interact with. And if you remember the old building, there was no climate control. Accessibility was horrible. We actually had buckets and hoses going around the ceiling to try to catch rainwater because it was leaking, the roof was leaking. And so we really wanted to create that jewel box for that pavilion, and also connect it more to the park in the river. So we actually were able to push that carousel as far as we could to that river's edge. And here's a great picture. And with the boardwalk and having that really urban interface with that kind of rugged natural look. Mm-hmm. And we're creating that jewel box with that glass rotunda that we have, which is fully climate controlled. And then we wanted that support mechanisms around it as well, what we call the wedge, with the restrooms, mechanical, the gift shop, and also party rooms. So there's these party rooms that come right out of into that space. And so that was our next project, and that was spring of 2018. And that also included what we called the South Gateway. So this was a part of the third major element, was our promenades and pedestrian corridors. And so this was that front door of Riverfront Park, of that beautiful, yellow riverfront sign that we have now, the reworking of the rotary fountain to have it be that iconic piece on that south end. And so that was our second project, and then moved into our third. And this was pieced in with different projects because we looked at efficiencies, but this was with the promenades. Through our master plan process, we really wanted to focus on accessibility, even to the point to where we meet regularly with a accessibility work group that not only checks to make sure what we're doing by law, but pushes that envelope even further. And just because this is the base minimum, our public has a lot of needs. And so one great recommendation that came out of that was a lot of our pathways in Riverfront Park now have this asphalt path, and then with these lighter ribbons on the edge that have different textures. So somebody that can't see very well or is blind, the contrasts and the edges and the different textures and pathways really helps define those spaces. And so that's just one example of many that we looked at. And so the promenade also was around safety, lighting, creating a more visual impact. So rather than these kind of hiding spots, being able to see where your destination is from point A to point B. And so that was a part of that promenade project as well, extending from all the way from Spokane Falls Boulevard to Malin and Howard on the north side. And a part of that project too was bridges. So we had 3 major bridges that were a part of that promenade project. And the first one is what we call the Orange Bridge. That was the first full replacement, just north of the Loof Carousel. And even with a bridge, you can get a little bit creative. So if you go to the edge, you have seating areas, you have these grates where you can actually look at the water flowing underneath you. The infrastructure, if you remember the old Riverfront Park, extension cords going everywhere, right? And hoses. And so now this was providing a space for Pig Out in the Park, food trucks, different activities. Excuse me.
No, by all means. I always just wanted to mention the bridge, down by the bridge is one of my favorite spots in the park, because you can, like you said, you can get down there. It's a great place to have your lunch and stuff. We should mention too that the Loof Carousel just reopened this week, for those of you that right? Wasn't that this week?
Yeah.
How's that gone for you guys?
It's going well. And I got to tell you, outside of the Riverfront project, our staff has been phenomenal. And our partners have been phenomenal to look at creative ways. You look across the nation, Parks and Recreation departments completely shut down during COVID. Just said, you know what, we'll come back. We'll come back when it's all said and done. We took a different approach. We took a different approach of trying to find ways to say yes. And one of those examples during the winter season was the ice ribbon. There was no guidelines or protocols for an ice ribbon, but we worked with our officials to be able to look at creative ways to open that up. And same with our carousel, 25% capacity. It's almost been closed for an entire year. Time really has kind of flown by, at the same time being very slow as well during this pandemic. But again, just to see that carousel now rotate in that rotunda, even if you're not riding it, I think it brings happiness to you just to know that it's open. Same with the ice ribbon. You know, if you're not an ice skater, but just to drive by and see people enjoying themselves, smiling. I think, you know, that was in the northwest section of a little kiddo on the carousel in the Spokesman-Review just recently, wearing a mask, even though you couldn't see their face, just by their eyes, to see that joy in those children being able to have that experience again, and that experience for the very first time.
Yeah. You were taking us kind of on a tour. We've gone across the bridge, and we were just arriving, I think, at the pavilion, right? I mean, that's the thing people eyes are kind of drawn to.
We're going across the bridge, and then we hit a section of what we call the Central Plaza. So this is an area, during the master plan, we really wanted to focus on how do you bring people into the center of the park? How do you create that central gathering place for the park? And the Central Plaza does that, as well as the pavilion. I mean, of course, one of the most iconic structures that we have in Spokane. And the pavilion was a unique project. We didn't have a lot of background or priorities of what that space would be. But we did know is we wanted to take away the clutter. If you remember the old pavilion with all those supplemental pieces and buildings in there, we wanted to take away that clutter. How did we create a lantern of the community in a central gathering place was another high priority. How do we have more connections to the river? How do we have views and elevation, illumination? Shade was another big one as well. So we really took those kind of 5 fundamental pieces and worked through a process which is called progressive design build. So this is where you hire your design team and your contractor at the same time, working together to find what the best solutions are. And was a very successful process, because then at certain points you could go back out to the community and ask, you know, what do you think of this? You know, what do you think of the light blades? What do you think of the elevated experience? And then we're able to know what the feasibility is and, you know, the cost associated with it. And through this process as well, progressive design build worked well because you're working with a very unique structure that's one of a kind. And to be able to have a contractor working with a designer along the way to eliminate some of that risk that you would see in a normal kind of design build bid build project. And I think we checked all of them off the box, quite honestly. That September night at that grand opening, where we really wanted to create this flexible gathering spot. We had the symphony there. We had our Spokane tribe there. We had a children's play there. We had a concert, a light show. And to see thousands of people underneath the pavilion, laying in the grass, looking up and seeing the light blades, the light show, enjoying themselves, I think we nailed it. And then the elevated experience too. It was this unique feature within and underneath this unique feature with the net structure and the illumination blades. And also too, I think what is nice to see, because you never know how the community is going to respond to a space. Mm-hmm. But then to see on just a normal night or a light show of just dozens of families just hanging out in the grass, just hanging, rolling down the hill, having a picnic, looking up at the lights and using it as that passive space as well. So it's just not for just big events, but it has that passive type of environment as well.
My kids like rolling down those hills. They do that quite a bit. Was that something you guys planned to have happen when you were getting this together?
Yeah, and I kind of use sometimes my personal experience too with a 7 and 4-year-old. And it's like, how can you as like a parent and family be enjoying yourselves at, just a nice informal concert, or just the light show, and the kids are just playing tag, running down and rolling down the hills. And then also it's pretty unique, and actually the seats of some of the benches and the terraces we have are glow in the dark rocks that are actually embedded in the stone, which is another cool feature. So yeah, it's really trying to look at the whole spectrum from kids all the way to seniors, because then we created an ADA access from all the way down to the bottom. You can get all the way up to the top of the elevated experience. So it's just not for your normal able-bodied type of person. It's for all to be able to enjoy.
So I think, we're continuing sort of that tour up north, but I think a lot of people are noticing obviously what's going on with the podium there across the way, but also the playground, and very eager to know when we might see that opening up with all the stuff that's going on. So what do you have as an update for that?
Yeah, the North Bank is one of the biggest transformations, I think, in the entire redevelopment project. We had the honor, Kip, to take you on a tour, during the construction, to take a look of what's going on. And if the citizens really remember what this space was like before, in this picture, you can see kind of that bottom half, and we have this beautiful basalt outcropping that kind of lines that whole North Bank. And then with the upper terrace where the podium is today, both those areas were traditionally dirt parking lots, really the back door of Riverfront Park. And through the master plan process, we really wanted to create the 2 front doors and more of an active space. It's not, yes, Riverfront Park does a great job at hosting events, but what about the everyday use of just a park? Playgrounds, basketball courts, skate parks, having that type of activity and excitement and energy around that North Bank. And stay tuned. Late spring, early summer is where we're going to kick it off, and I'll kind of just move through the project on the North Bank, because there's a lot of different pieces here that really highlight on. And so where we're looking at here, so if you're coming off the promenade and you're looking to your right, you're looking to the east, you look up the hill and you kind of see this zigzag pathway, and this is an ADA pathway up to the podium. So having that kind of direct connection to the sportsplex. And some people don't know too that this land was purchased for a science center years and years and years and years ago. Never happened. Dirt parking lot. And actually in the master plan process, identified some type of field house on the North Bank to be that kind of that foundational piece to activate that space. And here we are, so many years later, to have that structure there. So that's super exciting to see that come full circle and to come together. And then you start moving on the bottom is what we call the Ice Age Regional Flood Playground. And this is really a great balance between play and education. With rock outcroppings that kids and adults can climb on. We have this giant 35-foot tower that has resemblance to a basalt column with tube slides coming off of it. We have different MEMA mounds. We have our resilient surfacing is all poured in place, rubber with kind of an AstroTurf type of surfacing as well. So it goes above and beyond just the standard ADA requirements. This picture, we brought back the dinosaur bone that used to be in the old playground by the YMCA. So this was a perfect fit for this playground, and it's really embedded in that landscape. And then we move into I mentioned the climbing features, and then a splash pad. And the splash pad also tells a story. As far as there's these man-made rocks with these little fissures in them, and underneath there's these little sprays, and these sprays start spraying the kids off these rocks, like, this wall is starting to weaken, and there's something going to happen. And then there's sprays and jets on the ground plane, and then really the climax is this waterfall then flows over the edge of this wall and hits the children. So I just imagine screaming and running and laughing. And so just a great experience to integrate another splash pad on the north side. And then other different features like log jams, really custom pieces too in the playground that we're excited about. And then if we move then further east is something that I'm really excited about, because years ago, the city decided to decommission the skate park underneath the freeway across from Lewis and Clark High School. And then with that, came back and said, hey, at some point we'll be able to find a downtown alternative. It took a while, but here we are today in a super cool wheels facility that's around 8,000 square feet, that's really has the kind of rugged theme around the Ice Age floods in the playground. Has an urban park with your kind of traditional bowls in it as well. And it's just not tucked back into this random corner. It's really exciting. It's really highlighting of this kind of active recreational piece right in the middle of Riverfront Park. So that's another great feature to integrate in this project. Great stakeholders that have been a part of that project as well to really bring back to Riverfront Park, to downtown. And then if we go to the south of that, here's a little photo here, is if you think back to, we've never really had active recreation in Riverfront Park, something, that this infrastructure that was there where you could go on your lunch break and have a pickup game or throw a Frisbee. And partnering with Hooptown USA Hoop Fest, we're going to have the coolest outdoor basketball court in the region. So multiple courts here. You'll see there'll be an art mural that goes on top of it as well. There's lights, there's going to be speakers for music. We're looking at, working with Hoop Fest on programming it, different leagues, clinics. And so another super exciting feature there. And then also you see next to it is we really wanted to maintain some of the historical past as well. So two of the existing park shelters that are there today, we revamped, new roofs, going to give them a fresh look, a little paint. So it was nice to be able to salvage and save those. And now if you go a little bit further east, then we have an updated parking lot. So, parking was always one of those priorities to finding accessible parking downtown. And so we expanded parking in this area, what traditionally was there, around 160 parking stalls, lit, open, and it's actually the shortest distance accessible route to the pavilion as well. So you just head off of this parking lot, go across the Washington Street Bridge up into the pavilion. If there's an event going on, there's a bus drop-off zone. This has always been another one for field trips and it's very cumbersome and awkward with some of these buses to try to pull up and access the park. So we're able to achieve that as well. And then really just create an entrance. If you remember this intersection at North River Drive in Washington, it did not look like a park whatsoever. We had this old existing brick building on the corner, which was our M&O facility, tore down that, built a smaller, more efficient new one just across from that. So you can see in this picture, it's hard to tell, but it's right next to the skate park. We incorporated a M&O facility that has 4 family restrooms that are accessible to the public as well. And then just updating the intersection to be more inviting with turn lanes coming into the park, being able to access the park. Again, having another entry sign, a yellow entry sign is saying Riverfront, to really highlight this is a major entrance now on the north side to Riverfront Park.
Well, I think we've kind of walked all the way through there, and you said late spring, early summer. I asked you a version of this question a few weeks ago, and I guess I'll ask it again. I mean,
Yeah.
I think there's probably some concern that the health department. Obviously, we've had playgrounds open and all that kind of stuff, but would there be an effort? Some of these features, particularly the splash pad, could be something that's affected by continued sort of health guidance about aquatic centers and stuff like that. Would it be a situation where the playground's done, but you guys hold off on allowing the public in because of those restrictions, or have you had discussions about what that would look like?
We have, and Kip, part of me, I would love to have a big celebration out there. I mean, this is really the last major project, and let's celebrate. Let's have a party. Let's see the kids climbing all over everything, running through the splash pad. But our realities are a little different now, and right now, splash pads are very difficult to be able to operate under phase 2. So we're working with our officials on what phase 3 could potentially look like. But under splash pads right now, you need to pre-register to go on a splash pad, certain capacities, have a monitor. That's pretty difficult to do when you don't have like a fence and it's a controlled environment. So that's going to be pretty difficult. But at the same time, we also don't want to have this beautiful new shiny amenity that the citizens have paid for and our partners have paid for, and it's behind a fence and it's ready to go. So it might be a phased approach as well, to open that up. But we'll see. I mean, the way the trends are going, our communication is great too with our officials. We'll see here, where we're sitting in May, when the weather starts getting nicer, and how we're progressing and go from there. But we have a great team too that manages and sets up our grand opening events, whether it's virtual or in person. So it's going to be awesome. And one other piece that I forgot that it's super important too with the North Bank is, again, when we look at partners, there's just so many different partners. We got an RCO grant from the state, Hooptown USA, and another one too was the Jess Ross Kelly Foundation. Right. One of our local iconic climbers here in Spokane region, and their family came to us and said, wow, this is a special place, and we would love to be able to celebrate Jess's life in this special place. So through their foundation was able to donate a climbing boulder, a part of our project, that kids and adults will be able to climb all over. That was a bonus that was above and beyond our original scope that we were able to incorporate in the project. So it's another little kind of special piece of that project.
Yeah. That North Bank has certainly been, it's something that's been in discussion, because you guys kind of worked, as we talked about, the renovation has sort of worked its way up north, and there have been different sort of ideas about what would go up there and all that kind of stuff. And you mentioned we had a chance to tour it, and I continued to walk by it sort of during the day. It's really interesting and I think exciting to see. My kids were sort of flabbergasted by the size of that column and those slides. I think we're going to see a lot of people jumping around on those sooner than later. So really exciting to see. We do have a couple of questions that have come in, and thank you for those. And also compliments of what we're seeing in the park as well. Hopefully that's translated over to you, Garrett. But one of the questions, and this comes from Ellen, and this came as a result of what we saw, unfortunately, in January with damage from the windstorm. Do we know yet what's going to happen with the butterfly? What's the ultimate goal there?
Well, I'll tell you right now, I know that was one of the saddest, to get that call around 6:30 in the morning to say that the butterfly is down. It's just like, heartbreaking.
Because you guys worked really hard to get that back in, right?
Oh,
that was in storage for a while.
Yeah, it was heartbreaking to come down there that morning. And, fortunately, we all have to be blessed too that nobody was hurt, that everything happened the way it happened, if it was going to happen. Now I would say we're committed one way or another as far as figuring out what that replacement is. We've already started that process, really diving into what happened, why did it happen, and what advancements can we make to make sure that does not happen again. And so, right now we have some preliminary drawings around, so that iconic butterfly, what does that iconic butterfly look like at 2.0, with different mechanisms in relief valves. I'm not an engineer to even try to tell you all these different tension points and all this, but we're looking at those right now with our engineer group of let's look at how a real butterfly functions too. So rather than the wings, they stayed pretty stagnant. They went up and down and side to side. But what if they fold in and out, and that relieves some of that tension? How could we use light in a different way as well? So we're looking through all those possibilities. Unfortunately, we don't have an earmark there in the redevelopment project to replace the first butterfly, but we're working with all our partners as well. And we also put in an application for FEMA. We saw a significant damage across our entire system, upwards of $700,000. Just about as much damage, or a little bit more on the value side, than the 2015 for us in the windstorm. So our commitment is the butterfly will come back. We'll just work and update the public on the timing of that, and then also an input of what that kind of butterfly 2.0 looks like.
Okay. Well, it was a really interesting story how it came back in the park, and I know there were a lot of people who are passionate about seeing it back in the park. So seeing something similar, that's interesting. You talk about the actual aerodynamics of a butterfly. I don't know what those are either. I'm not a biologist or an engineer, but it'll be interesting to see.
I was just going to say, we're actually looking at a lot of how sailboats work as well.
Wow, okay.
So, super creative team. One of the team members is the same that did our shade sails in the pavilion, that specialize in that, and different engineering techniques. So I'm excited what we're seeing so far, and then we just want to make sure that what we're proposing works before then we come out to the public to be able to have those discussions on input.
Sounds good. Well, I had this question, and Ann has it as well. First of all, they said great job on Riverfront Park, Garrett and City Parks, really enjoying what they're seeing, and appreciated bringing the dinosaur bone back, which I know a lot of people was. Ann had the question, and I had a similar question. The pavilion opens, then we have the pandemic, and some of these marquee events that were supposed to take place there kind of put off a year. Is there a plan in terms of the programming for that space this year? And then maybe kind of talk just a little bit about the idea of having these spaces, and maybe some of the, I don't know if disappointment or frustration is the right word for having this new space, and then right when you're ready to show it off, something like this coming along and sort of cutting down on that. What was that like for you and your team?
It was tough, and I got it was really tough at first as well. But we've learned, and we're just adapting and kind of just rolling with being very flexible. I always keep going and looking back at those pictures and shots of that opening weekend, and I'm just like, oh my gosh! I mean, that's what we need in Spokane. That's what that's what we need our community to come together and. And we've been able to look at small things like the winter market. We were able to kind of kick off this with a trail of lights, and that was great coming down with the family and seeing, when it's 20 degrees out, that the park was pretty busy. There were people enjoying themselves and being safe doing it as well. But it has, every season it's like, all right, here's where we're going to have 10 concerts this year. And it's like, it's not going to happen. But I would say we never give up. And so what we focus on now is these rolling timelines. And we're also working with the health district on what major events and venues look like as well, and working with the event organizers. So we never like give up on saying, okay, if April 1st is the drop dead date, sorry, come back next year. We kind of look at, well, what does next month look like, and could we push it out to October? And we have a promoter too, just on the concert side, that works with us, that is has been hit as well during this pandemic. But we're always just looking for that next kind of step, and we'll get there. But it's been tough to see all the what ifs, what we're hoping for not come together yet, but they will, and we keep working on it. So if you call and you want to do an event, we're not going to tell you no. It's just like, well, here's what we're going to have to consider. Here's some different, and we're going to have to be flexible and work together.
To that point, we've had the skate ribbon now for a while, and I think people are used to people, roller skating and stuff and having rides on there. What is that going to look like? Do we know this year in terms of? I know originally there had been plans maybe to have some like farmers markets and stuff on there. Obviously, that's kind of challenging now too. What's that going to look like this summer?
I think everything's on the table. We're going to look at how we can really flex that space, and two, working with local businesses as well. Is when we meet with them, is don't forget about the public assets and the public infrastructure that you have. If you feel like you can leverage our spaces, come to us. We're willing to work. Whether it's outdoor spaces, we're able to spread out people more. We do plan to bring back, of course, the roller skating and activate that space with other events, continue to work with our downtown partners and businesses as well to be able to activate that space, looking at promotions. So, over the winter and even in the carousel, have these cross promotions. So if you come and skate or use the Sky Ride, you get a $20 gift card to these partnering local downtown restaurants or businesses. So we really want to be able to tie everything together to where the community feels that Riverfront Park is an asset that can leverage our recovery efforts as we work through the pandemic. And so that's been pretty special to be able to work with. These poor restaurant owners, in a lot of cases, it's just been a struggle. And how can we work together? And sometimes it's it's frustrating, but we continue to say, how can the city be that support mechanism? And and anything's on the table. Let's just discuss anything you want. And so we want to continue to activate that space. Probably similar program or protocols that we saw for the ribbon during the winter, for the rollerblading. But that was one thing that we weren't able to have at all last year in 2020. So it'll be exciting to at least bring that back.
A step or two there in that normalcy direction. I think we got time for a couple more questions here. And I had one more from Ann, who has a ton of questions. Thanks for watching so much, Ann. And that's you mentioned the bridges. Where are we at in terms of the pedestrian bridge, reopening that to the public? What's the status on that right now?
Great question, Ann, and appreciate that, and great timing as well. So the bid, or the ad for bid for the North Suspension Bridge actually went out yesterday. So we hope to get bids back into this month. Now, it was one of those kind of timing things. It was right when I started as the director job, and the bottom of the concrete in the bridge actually literally started falling into the river. And, we had to make the decision, safety for our citizens is number one. So we shut it down. Didn't have any capital budget whatsoever allocated towards it. But we applied for grants. We worked with the administration, the city council. We worked on our end to save and pinch pennies where we could. So we feel we're at a very, that's a sad picture. We're at a good place now to be able to design it. Vista's been a great partner. A lot of people don't know. There's major power distribution lines that go underneath these bridges from the south to the north side. So pretty complicated project, but a lot of it's the restructure of the deck, the rails, new infrastructure. So this year we're crossing our fingers. We hope we get good bids back, but the design is done. We've actually done the design on both bridges, but we need to make sure we get this north one back up and running, and timing's good too. With what's going on in the Post Street Bridge right now. There's some other private development happening on the north bank adjacent to this bridge. And so we just want to get in there. We want to get this done and get it back to the public. So,
well, one more listener question. This is from David, and you could talk. David's kind of interested in the World's Fair theme with Expo 74 and all that kind of stuff. Its theme was environmental, protecting the environment and all that kind of stuff. Great spot, obviously, for that presentation there on the river. David's wondering, is there a way to reference through interpretive signage all of the sustainability efforts at Riverfront Park? Has that been discussed? Some of the efforts you talked about to keep things green and show kind of back to the, referencing the environment.
Yeah, that's a great question. We're working on that right now, and it reminds me, and I want to hit on one other item too, Kip, because you've showed this picture a couple of times around the Providence Playscape, another huge win.
Yes. Yeah.
But the interpretive signage too, and also celebrating the citizens and stakeholders that made Expo happen. I mean, that was no easy task, and celebrating that, but then also the measures of what we've done, celebrating our heritage and our culture, working with the Spokane tribe. And, we renamed Canada Island into a Sunmene, which is the salmon island, and working on that as far as telling the story of how this place was very, it was special to the tribe. And so, and then also we're working on the environmental measures as well. And we're doing this in other parks, with Manitou, our quarry, the Boulevard, and so that is one area. How can we celebrate of what we're doing in the landscape? Because then, if you can learn of maybe what we're doing or what we're piloting, how could you then, in turn, do something like that at your own private residence, right? To be able to conserve water or use these type of plants that use less water and are native, and looking at different kind of design techniques.
Well, I have one more question for you, Garrett. You've been very generous with your time. We've got some other, and there's the Playscape, by the way. We should mention that. The ability for people to play of all ability levels and all that kind of stuff. That's been open. When did that open, Garrett? How long has that been open?
Oh, it was in a snowstorm. We had a virtual event.
Right, I remember the pictures. Yeah.
I'll be honest. Sometimes my dates the last year have been very blurry. But oh boy, when was it? It was before the new year. It was either November. But yes, crazy snowstorm, but great project because we identified other project outside of the bond. Providence Healthcare stepped up to the plate, and working with the Parks Foundation funded this entire project. Our first in our system to be considered an all-inclusive, all abilities playground that looks at all different sensory levels, textures, mobility, balance, how kids interact. So it's been an awesome project.
Well, I just have one more question for you then going forward here. Really appreciate the time and everyone joining us here. The park was obviously a after Expo, it was sort of a way to use that space and all that kind of stuff. And this, as you mentioned in the beginning, this redevelopment has been an effort to sort of reimagine that space, but also update it for the first time. We're going to look ahead 50 years from now. What legacy do you hope as the director of the parks? Do people remember about the work that was done to update the park? And what do you hope they're looking at, in that park 30, 40, 50 years from now? Have you allowed yourself to ask yourself that question? I don't know.
For me, it's if we're able to provide the space, I think the biggest success is the experiences and the memories that that our citizens and tourists have in the park.
Mhm.
Regardless of the brick and mortar and things like that, it's about the experience. It's about those moments in time that you'll remember for the rest of your life, whether it was a concert or the light show or playing with your kids at the playground or just strolling through the park on, every Saturday morning. It's about the experience. And, that's the business that we're in Parks and Recreation. That's why I think I have the greatest job in the world. It's about creating those moments and experiences that are everlasting. And I think that is the biggest success.
Great, great. Well, obviously a lot going on in the park, even with everything that's going on health wise, and hopefully we continue to obviously continue to emerge from the pandemic, getting those vaccines out, continuing to take those safety measures. We'll have the full majesty of the park kind of able to enjoy here going forward. But it is, like I said, I think a great day to kind of look at this nice weather and all that kind of stuff. You can take a stroll, definitely do that. Garrett, really appreciate the time this afternoon and updating us on everything. And we'll look forward to continue events at the park. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks, Kip, and appreciate everybody, listening in and your questions and comments and your value and commitment to Riverfront Park. And of course, our park system. We have one of the greatest park systems in this country here in Spokane. And it's because of our citizens and the support. So thank you.
Yeah, and thanks, Garrett. And as Garrett said, thanks all of you for watching. We have several more events coming up here, and you can see those in the pages of the Spokesman-Review and on our website. But for now, we'll sign off. Thanks so much, Garrett, and everybody have a great day.